The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions, and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Teflon Pan Man. Teflon Pan Man. Stick on me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to All You Can Eat. It is the podcast about deliciousness, and I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal. Thrilled to be with you again today, coming to you live from Miami Beach, Florida. And hey, this is exciting as always. Thank you for coming back. Glad you're here. We're going to talk about deliciousness. You know, at some point, maybe the next one. This is episode number 131, by the way. Maybe for the next one, I'll tell you a little bit more about Miami, because it's what a great place, and I've come to know it pretty well over the last year. The last couple of episodes of All You Can Eat have been about recent travels that I've had, fortunately, to Morocco. That was a couple of episodes ago, and then over to Spain from there. So I feel that it would be a decent idea to come at you next time with something about Miami here in these United States. What a great, thriving, interesting city with an awesome, food scene, both in terms of restaurants, the quality, the variety of food. I used to spend a lot of time here when I was back in the international advertising business. Miami was kind of a base for South, Central, Latin America. And so, the food here is extraordinary in its variety, because you have Cuban, a lot of that. You have Venezuelan, you have Peruvian, which is, I've always felt, probably some of the best food you can get out of South America. And while you can get some Mexican here, you also are more likely to find Argentine, Brazilian, Colombian, the South American countries. And I, as a native New Yorker, will tell you that I'm quite thrilled with the idea that I can get really good pizza now these days in Miami, so it's all good. But today's episode is really about a different form of deliciousness, and it's about cooking, because I have been doing just a ton of it. And there's some stuff I want to tell you about in the world of cooking that I have been making, and I feel like it's time to get into some recipes. And the first one is going to be for sauce. And I mean tomato sauce or marinara sauce. Call it what you like. The sauce is built on tomatoes. And it's something that I have always said to people forever and always, which is that there are two things that you should always make yourself, rather than buy from the supermarket. One of them is sauce. Now, it's very easy for you to go in and pick up a bottle of tomato sauce at the supermarket. I get that. It will never, ever be as good as a sauce that you can easily make on your own. And easily is the operative word. I make tomato sauce all the time. You require only a few ingredients. And if you know me, if you've heard me before, my entire cooking philosophy is the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. So to make a tomato sauce, you don't even have to wait till tomato season. You don't have to use ripe tomatoes, which would normally in this country come to you around August. Most of the tomatoes that you get the rest of the year are not, let's say, they're not peak performance tomatoes. Now, if you wanted to make a tomato sauce with fresh tomatoes, you certainly could. You just have to know which ones to buy. And we can talk about that after. I am here to tell you that I use canned tomatoes, and generally speaking, they are Italian. They don't have to be, but certainly there's a part of Italy where the tomatoes are just perfect to make a sauce, and it's a place called San Marzano. But, don't panic, don't stress. The bottom line is, if you go to a supermarket, you get yourself the best can of canned tomatoes that you can find. And what makes them the best? Well, they're mostly just tomatoes. There's not a lot of other stuff added to them. There's not a lot of noise. There's not a lot of nonsense. You're looking for plum tomatoes. Ideally, they come in a can. And they come whole. And they come in a ton of different ways. But I happen to like the whole ones. If you have crushed tomatoes, that would work. I suppose you can also do this thing with tomato puree. Whatever it is that you choose, you want the raw ingredients, as always, to be the best that they can be. So, given the choice, get yourself the best quality canned tomatoes that you can. Generally, they come like 28 ounces, 28-ounce can. And that's enough, by the way, to make sauce for a pound of pasta. And all you really need, aside from that, is you need some olive oil and some garlic. Can you add other things into your tomato sauce? And the answer is, of course, you can, right? Because you can add in a little bit of onion or shallot. You can add in, and I would add in, actually, some red pepper flakes, just a pinch of those, because that adds a little hit of flavor and heat to it. You don't need a ton. But if all you end up having in your home is a decent olive oil and some fresh cloves of garlic that you are going to peel and slice, and a can of tomatoes, the only other ingredient really required of you at that point is salt. Could you amplify this now or later with some fresh basil? Don't even worry about it. Sure, you could. But the point is, you're going to open up a can of plum tomatoes, and if they're whole, as I like to get them, I blend them or crush them. A lot of people like to crush them with their hands, which is great because it's fun. You really get to, there's something great about having your hands on the actual food. And texturally, to crush them with your hands all the way is fine. In a bowl, no problem. Do it that way. I stick them in a blender. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. But I'm going to cook the tomatoes once they've been crushed or blended or whatever you want to call them. You're not going to cook them whole. Olive oil goes into your frying pan or your saucepan. And as to how much olive oil, the question is this: how much olive oil do you need to toast up, to cook up, to put a little heat on your sliced garlic cloves? That's how much olive oil you need. If you put more in, it wouldn't be a problem because it has good taste. But ideally, what you're really doing is you're really toasting up, if you will, your sliced up garlic. How many cloves of garlic? Well, again, what is your garlic? What is your garlic affectation? I don't know. Call it what you want. I mean, I like garlic, right? So if I was going to make one can of 28-ounce can of canned tomatoes, sauce for basically, a good pound of pasta, I might use 3 or 4 sliced cloves of garlic. Can you use more? Yes. Can you use less? Sure. You got a problem with garlic? Go ahead and use onion. You get a slightly different sauce if you do it that way, a little sweeter. The thing about the garlic that is crucial is you do not want to overcook it. You want to basically, give it a little touch of brown. It's going to turn the color of say, a peanut or a hazelnut. It has a slight brown to it. And when you fry up the garlic in the oil, you will notice pretty instantly that smell. That's a beautiful smell, and it happens within 30 to 60 seconds generally. So that's the level of heat that you're going to use. So just to be clear now, we have a pan that is on medium-high heat. We have olive oil that goes in the pan and 3 cloves, thinly sliced, of garlic until they turn, 30 to 60 seconds, a lovely little shade of brownish. There, you have fried your garlic. You are ready now for the second stage, which is to dump in all of the tomatoes that you have just crushed by hand and all of the juice that they were packaged with. You are now going to cook this It's going to take not a very long time. The heat is going to be, again, enough medium to medium high so that you can see movement in the pan. You can see a little bit of simmering. And the only thing that you're going to need at this point is to add in your salt. How much salt, Rob? I'm going to say go ahead and put in a half a teaspoon. Put in a half a teaspoon. And why? Because 10 minutes later or 15 minutes later, it's cooked. It's pretty much done cooking at that point. You're going to take a little spoon and you're going to taste it. And you're going to say, wow, that's really good just as it is. Or you're going to say, hey, you know what? I could use a pinch more salt. Or you may want to grind in some fresh peppercorns. Now, you do or do not have to grind in the fresh peppercorns. Again, depending on whether or not you choose to use some red pepper flakes, which I put in, by the way, I forgot to mention, with the garlic. So, the garlic goes in, the peppercorn, the red pepper flakes go in, what they call pepperoncino, if you want a little bit of spicy, and there you go. You're cooking up the garlic, the tomatoes go in, you give it a stir, you let it simmer for let's say 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. You're done. Your work is done. Taste it, see if it needs more salt, and you have yourself tomato sauce. Let's talk a little bit about the potential variations on this thing. Could you put in some grated up carrot? You could. I don't. It's not necessary. It adds, if you cook it down, a little bit of sweetness. Could you add in other vegetables in your sauce? And the answer is you sure can. If you had, for example, some squash, and I don't mean like big chunks of squash, I mean kind of like pureed squash, you could certainly put that into the sauce, and it makes it, that much more kind of chewy or toothsome or whatever you want to call it. Necessary? Not at all. The only thing that's necessary, the ingredients I gave you, which is olive oil, salt, a little bit of pepperoncino if you want, and your tomatoes, and you are good to go. Now, what I love about having tomato sauce on hand is that not only can you pour it over your pasta, in which case, you may want to, at that point, grate in some, Parmesan Reggiano cheese. You may want to top it with a little black pepper. You may want some fresh basil. These are all beautiful, very simple, right, to make a lovely plate of pasta. But what I actually like so much is that sauce has a lot of purposes for me. Anytime that I'm making any other type of dish that can use tomato flavoring in it, like, for example, if you were going to braise some meat, and maybe your braising liquid, is a chicken or a beef or a vegetable type broth, you could certainly add in any leftover tomato sauce and enhance the flavor of that braising liquid. But what I do is, and I do intentionally make some extra tomato sauce, I make what's called, oftentimes, the morning after, shakshuka. And shakshuka is a dish there from the Middle East that is based on braising eggs in the tomato sauce. And it's a wonderful, wonderful dish for a couple of reasons. First of all, your tomato sauce is delicious, and if you like eggs, cooking them in a tomato sauce is good. It's just lovely. But what's so great about it is your ability to use that tomato sauce as kind of a canvas. It is very customizable. So, for example, in the Middle East, you'll see that they would add into the tomato sauce certain herbs and spices and flavorings, everything from kind of cumin and paprika and whatever other kind of spices or Middle Eastern flavors you may like. And they also will add in other ingredients, and that includes, by the way, cheese, or it includes, obviously cheese is something that would make sense, and it would be, it could be a feta or it could be a goat or any kind of cheese. Frankly, goes nicely in there. You can add in, tahini. Is a classic example of taking that shakshuka and bringing it to a whole different level of taste. So those are all ways that you can customize your shakshuka, and the concept is very simple. You sizzle up the tomato sauce that you have. If you want to make it spicy, you can certainly add in some, hot, like a jalapeno type pepper to the thing, or more red pepper flakes or cayenne pepper if you want to go that way. Add in whatever flavors you like to the base level of the tomato sauce, and then break in 3 or 4 eggs so that they are completely intact. You can see the yolk, and at that point, you're going to put a cover over the tomato sauce and the eggs, and you're going to let them simmer. I would say 5 to 10 minutes more or less, depending on how high your heat is and how you like your eggs. I want the eggs to be cooked, the white to be cooked, obviously, all the way through, as do you. But at the same time, I do want to see some. I do want to see some yellow. I want to see some yolk when that thing is done cooking. So I'll give them 5-6 minutes. I can see that the white is firm. At that point, I may want to add in some cheese to the whole thing. I may want to toss in some fresh herbs, whatever I happen to have on hand. That could be anything from cilantro to basil to, tarragon, whatever your flavors are that you love. And you have yourself a beautiful shakshuka. And the best way to eat it is kind of like to have some, maybe some pita bread that you dip into those eggs, that you dip into the yellow, and you scoop it up together with the cheese and with the tomato sauce. And that is really delicious eating. So make yourself tomato sauce, very simple. Make yourself shakshuka the morning after. Really outstanding and delicious. And there you go. I mean, that's home cooking at its best. I probably didn't mention when I started on this conversation that the other thing that I tell people to make all the time, rather than buy, is your own salad dressing. And the bottom line is this. I don't care what kind of salad dressing you buy in the store. I mean, I love Paul Newman. But bottom line is you will never get a dressing as good as what you can make at home. And again, simple, because you need olive oil and you need vinegar and you need a little bit of garlic or shallot or red onion, and you need salt and pepper. And if you're me, you need a little Dijon mustard to help kind of blend the whole thing together and emulsify. And the ratio can be anything from 2 parts of oil to 1 part of vinegar to 3 parts of oil to 1 part of vinegar. Those are the kind of the classic ratios. But again, learn how to and adjust your own. Don't forget the salt and the pepper. So I always make salad dressing and I always make tomato sauce. And one of the things that I also make a lot that I wanted to share today is I make soup. But the particular kind of soup that I make is vegetable soup. And the reason why is because I can make a vegetable soup with an enormous ton of flavor. Just a ton of flavor. It almost tastes, well, I would hesitate to use the word meaty, but I think you could certainly use the word savory to describe my vegetable soup. Like, it has a lot of flavor. It's rich. And yet, at the same time, it's really it's not fat-free. I mean, I throw a little olive oil in the pan, but it is mostly fat-free, and it has no dairy in it, and it has no other fat in it, and so it's incredibly low in calories, super nutritious, and healthy, and filling, and that's the kind of clean eating that I like to do when I'm eating clean, which is rare, but again, you have to compensate for the party. And so the trick to my vegetable soup is twofold. 1, I use a lot of vegetables. And 2, more importantly, I roast a lot of vegetables. And any time that you are roasting vegetables, you are engaged in the process of caramelization, in which case the natural sugars from the vegetables begin to cook and brown. And what that buys you is a load of flavor. So while you can use any vegetables that you have to make a vegetable soup, because it's generally you're just throwing a whole lot of vegetables into a pot with some liquid, and so you can invent your own soup. But I was turned on some years ago. There's a very kind of well-known chef in New York City, Cesare, who is a great cook and once gave a recipe for his vegetarian soup, which he kind of called almost like a cleansing soup. And that doesn't sound as appetizing or delicious as you know that I want to be, because anytime you start to use words like cleansing, that's not the same as using words like rich and savory and umami and scrumptious, right? But I ended up making his soup. And what made his soup extraordinary was, in fact, that he was using a whole lot of vegetables and he was roasting them. And so he was roasting cabbage, and he was roasting cauliflower, and he put into that soup probably some fennel, and I believe there was also some squash. So you with me on this? Yesterday, I make a ton of variations of a vegetable soup, roasted vegetable soup, depending on what I have on hand. I notice in my refrigerator that I have some parsnips, the long one. They look like carrots, but they're white. And I have some carrots. And I have some onion. And, if you have celery, that's good. And then come the vegetables. And so I like fennel, and I like squash, as I mentioned to you. And I like cauliflower in this thing, and cabbage is crucial. And then I also will put into the soup some greens, by which I mean anything from collard greens, which I love, to kale, to chard. So follow me on this one, because here's the way this soup goes down, and I promise you, if you make the effort, you will have some of the best soup that you've ever had, and it'll be, as I said, super healthy, filling, nutritious, and you keep it in the fridge and have it basically, 2, 3, 4 days. I make a ton of it. So for me, it starts with some onion and carrot and celery, or as the French like to call it, your mirepoix. The combination of onion and carrot and celery is classic in French cooking, and you cut them up into kind of small pieces, small dice, and with a little bit of olive oil, enough to lubricate the bottom of your soup or stock pan, you toast. And when I say toast, the word is actually sweat. The vegetables that you cut up into relatively fine dice get sweat, which means that you're not looking to get color on them. You're just looking to soften them a little bit and bring out their natural flavors. And then once I have done that, I am inclined at that point to add in some garlic. Again, with the same notion that we discussed before. I like garlic. I put in a bunch of garlic. A half a dozen cloves of garlic go in there. And they don't go in at the very beginning because, again, you never want to burn garlic. It gets bitter. You just want to kind of cook it up a little bit. So once I've kind of sweat the original mirepoix, carrot, celery, onion, I can put in some garlic and maybe a pinch of salt and maybe some black pepper, right? Because why should we not flavor this at every level of the cooking process? Now, at the same time, the squash has been cut into small pieces, or you can buy it that way. Or you can roast squash whole, in the oven. Not a big deal, and then you'll scoop it out later into the soup. And I'm going to now slice up a whole head of cabbage, and I'm going to hit it up with some olive oil, and I'm going to brown that in the oven. So your oven is 375, 400 degrees. You have a platter, and when I say a platter, I mean a sheet pan, obviously, of cabbage that has some oil on it, maybe some salt and pepper. That goes into the oven. Your squash is going to get roasted in the oven. Your cauliflower gets cut up into florets, and that goes into the oven to get roasted. Your fennel, if you are using it, gets sliced up. Olive oil, salt, pepper, that's in the oven roasting. Everything is in the oven roasting. I go relatively high heat. Maybe it's 425, maybe it's 450. I'm looking for brown on all of these things. And if you wanted to put carrots in the oven to roast, sure. And if you wanted to put parsnips into the oven to roast, why not? And if you don't have cauliflower, or you don't want it, and you want to use broccoli instead, sure, go ahead and do that. The point is that any vegetables And if you wanted to make your soup a little thicker, for example, go ahead and put a potato in. You can do that as well, roast or not roast. We can talk about that. But we're roasting vegetables. The mirepoix and the garlic has been sweat. Once the mirepoix and the garlic have been sweat, I'm going to now add liquid into the soup pot. That liquid can be anything from chicken stock to vegetable stock, if you want to keep it entirely vegetarian, to water. Not a problem. Water is not a problem in this thing. I actually do use water, but then I add in a little bit of that soup base that they sell. Better Than Bouillon, it's called. And I want to keep it vegetarian, so I put in maybe a tablespoon of that vegetable stock, Better Than Bouillon. But you could use whatever. Like I said, you can go water, you can go chicken stock, veg stock, whatever it is. And you're going to put enough liquid in that thing. I'm going to say 6 cups if you need the measurement, so that by the time you now start adding the roasted vegetables in, whatever vegetables you have roasted, when they get color, you put them into that pot. And there's enough liquid in there at that point, hopefully, to cover everything. If not, put in a little more liquid. Right? So now you have a pot that has carrot, celery, onion, garlic, and it probably also has in it another 3 or 4 vegetables, and that would be everything that you roasted off in the oven. It could be cauliflower, it could be squash, grate, it could be the cabbage for sure. I love in that thing, fennel if you have it. And now I'm going to add in a couple other things. I like greens, so I have no problem putting in handfuls of greens. I love collard greens, ton of flavor, super nutritious. So those go in. And now I'm thinking to myself one other thing. Do I want to make this thing a little tomatoey? Hey, you know what? I have some tomatoes on hand. So I put in I cut up and put in a bunch of tomatoes in the thing. Do you have to? No. I have some tomato paste on hand, so I drop that in. Maybe you have some of that leftover tomato sauce we talked about before, so that can go in. All flavor. And then comes what I would call the flavor profile. And so if you wanted to make this thing Middle Eastern, you might add in some cumin. You could put in some turmeric, a teaspoon of cumin, a half a teaspoon of turmeric, maybe some other spice that you like. Maybe you want to do something that feels, instead of Middle Eastern or Mediterranean, maybe you just want to go in with some, herbs de Provence and give it that kind of European profile. Maybe you want to go in there with something that's Mexican, right? You could go in with some chili powder, for example, and that kind of thing. So the beauty, again, of this type of recipe is that it allows you to personalize, to customize the flavoring to your taste. And once everything is in that pot, I get the heat up relatively high. I want to see it come to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, I put it down to a simmer and I let it simmer for 20 or 30 minutes. And here's another little trick for you. You are going to taste the soup at some point and determine how much more or not of salt you need. Grind in some pepper. Again, if you had wanted to make it spicy, you could put in some cayenne pepper, or you could put in some red pepper flakes, or you could chop in a jalapeno. Anything that you want to do is fine. And I also take the opportunity to take advantage of other things I may have in the refrigerator. And here I'm thinking, sometimes I keep the rind of my Parmesan Reggiano. I love the cheese, what they call the king of cheeses, but at the very end of it, you're kind of left with the rind. Well, that rind is going in my soup when it hits the boil, because it just brings added flavor. And there you have it. The only thing that you are going to decide after you've tested for seasoning is what is the texture that you are looking for. By which I mean that right now that soup is chunky because it has chunks of roasted vegetables in it. And that soup can easily be made creamy. And when I say creamy, I don't mean by adding in cream. I mean we blend. Blending can be done relatively easy with what you call the stick blender, one of those blenders that you can pick up for, I'm guessing $25, $35, and it goes right in the pot. You press the button and you stir it around until it hits the temperature that you want, the texture that you want. Or you could take out the soup a little bit at a time and put it into an actual blender and blend it that way. Be careful, though, because hot liquid you do not want shooting out on you. That's some serious burning. You could do the same thing in a food processor, or you could mash the thing if you want. You could mash it with a potato masher, any way that you want. But at the end of the day, I actually do put the stick blender in, and I get a lovely kind of creamy texture, but I still also leave chunks so you can identify some of those vegetables that you have in there. And if you want, by the way, and I didn't mention it before, but I threw into this particular batch that I made today, I had beans, so I rinsed, and a can of whatever they were, red kidney beans went in here as well. This soup is so awesomely good, and you almost feel, I don't know, I mean, it's amazing that you're eating something that's so good, and yet at the same time, so not heavy, not fattening, not filled with calories. So that's today's discussion about soup. Now, I'm going to skip over to chicken, and I'm going to skip it because I had chicken last night that I didn't even make. But they were my brother-in-law's chicken wings. And when he said, I'm going to bring over some chicken wings, I said yes. And the reason why is because I am a chicken wing addict, which is to say, it's third on my list of foods that when they're in front of me, I kind of can't stop eating. I love chicken wings. And I love them in 1,000 different ways. And I love them not only because they are delicious, but I find them indestructible, which is to say, unless you completely burn them out, you can cook these things for a while. And you can cook them, and you should cook them until they're brown and crispy. And you can kind of tell that by looking at them. You don't have to be a professional chef to be able to look in the oven 30 minutes later and go, wow, those look pretty good now, ready to eat. But moreover, they will take any flavor you give them. They are an open canvas, if you will, to whatever flavor you want. And as a guy who is always looking for the fewest possible ingredients for the most flavor, Uncle Dave wins the prize for the 2-ingredient chicken wings that are always good. And when I say 2 ingredients, one of them is the chicken wing, and the other is Frank's hot sauce. Period. End of story. All David does is use chicken wings and Frank's hot sauce. He happens to baste his chicken wings 5 times. I don't have the patience. I mean, if it were me, I would dunk these things in the Frank's hot sauce. I'd stick them in an air fryer for 30 minutes, call it a day. And they'd still be great. His are better because he does take the time to, I guess, layering is what you would call it. I mean, he takes them out, he hits them up with more Franks, he puts them back in, he takes them out, he hits them with more Franks, put them back, and they're just fantastic, and they're 2 ingredients. The only thing that I will do is I am willing, when I make them, to add ingredient number 3 and number 4. There is a particular spice blend that I have spoken about before and that I love. It's called Berbere, B-E-R-B-E-R-E. It is from the country of Ethiopia. It's got 10, 12, 15 different spices that are blended together. The flavor's unbelievable. It's just so awesome. So that when I make my chicken wings, whether chicken wings, chicken thighs, if you want to do it that way, I wet them down with the Franks, and then I sprinkle them pretty heavily with the Berbere. And I let them cook until they're almost done. And when I know that I only have 5 to 10 minutes left of cooking, I actually then will hit the wings up with something a little sweet. And a little sweet can be anything from, honey to maple syrup to, you could use agave. You could use any type of, sweetener. You could probably even use apricot preserves as an example. And I put on the sweetness at the very end, because both the Franks and the Berbere are spicy, and while I'm happy with that, you can moderate, you can bring down a little bit the spice level if you put a little sweetness on the thing. And the reason you do it at the end of the process is simply because the anything sweet will burn more quickly. And so you put that sweetness on at the end, you keep the heat on, and then you watch to make sure that they don't burn. But they do take on a very beautiful color that some people might look at and say, hey, that looks burnt. They're not. It doesn't get any better than that. So chicken wings, whether you do them solely with the Frank's hot sauce, which is the kind of the classic hot sauce from Buffalo, where they make, obviously where buffalo chicken wings originated, or whether you add in a couple of other flavors, which in my case happens to be a little bit of Berbere, and maybe a little sweetness at the end, or chicken wings in general. Again, I in my cookbook, Short Order Dad, I have a recipe for chicken thighs, and I call them intuitive because they'll take any flavor you want to give them. And then you stick them in the oven until they're crispy, and life is good. Very simple and very beautiful. The other thing about chicken is that while I roast the chicken every single week, and I should mention again, the only other concept that I say like repeatedly is get the best ingredients you can, always. My brother-in-law noticed yesterday that his wings were really better than usual, and it turns out he actually purchased better quality chicken wings. So again, whatever it is that you're making, there's nothing really more important than the quality of the raw ingredients to the end product. So I do roast the chicken every week, and I'm not even going to bother getting into my roasted chicken recipe, but you can imagine it's simple. It is. It's garlic and lemon, basically. But I do mention, because I like dark meat, and so if I'm roasting a chicken, the part of the chicken that gets eaten is the thighs and the wings and the legs, and generally what's left over is the white meat breast. And so the following day, it's time for me to cut that up and turn it into chicken salad. And chicken salad's easy, right? Because you're just going to cut up that breast of chicken, and you're going to put in some mayonnaise, and that's pretty much chicken salad right there. But I'm big on, again, what else can I bring to that chicken salad that would make it interesting? And I like a little bit of curry in that. I like a teaspoon or a half a teaspoon of curry powder in that, and I have curry chicken salad. And when I make that, I realize that anytime I've had curry chicken salad, there's usually something else in it. And it's usually something that's almost a little bit sweet. Like it could be like little bits of apple, or it could be like little bits of raisin, for example, or currants, or that kind of thing, little bits of dried fruit. And once I have that, there's usually something crunchy in there as well, like pine nuts or pistachio nuts or other kind of things. So again, this is really a conversation about something simple, which is leftover chicken that converts to chicken salad with the addition of some other flavors that you happen to have around that turn it from, hey, that's good, into, whoa, that's great, I really love that. And it's the same for me with tuna salad, which is another one on my regular rotation. I'm not sure what I'm going to have when it comes time to eat. There's always some nice canned tuna in the house. What can I do with it? And I learned something, ironically, from my mother. And I say ironically because as a kid growing up, she used to pack tuna fish salad sandwiches for me for school. And it was disgusting. I mean, you get to school, and then 4 hours later, you open up your lunch bag, and it stunk, and it was warm, and the bread was soaking wet, and it was inedible. And I was always thankful that there were potato chips in there and an apple, because otherwise that would be nothing to eat. So ironically, she told me that when she makes tuna salad, she puts mayonnaise and that green, that hamburger relish in it. And so now when I make tuna salad, I use mayonnaise and relish, and it's a game changer. It's just fantastic. And one of the things I like to do, by the way, because relish is basically chopped up pickles. Here's another little aside, little tip from the side there. When I have pickles in the house, and they come in a large jar, and usually when the pickles are done, there's still some pickle juice left over. I use that, I use that pickled juice when I'm making tuna salad because I want to add some moisture to the tuna salad. Great, super. Same if you wanted to do it in the chicken salad. Same if you want to add it to your salad dressing. Seriously, I save pickled juice and use it for all of those things. So tuna salad, yeah, mayonnaise, green relish, shot of pickle juice if you got it, blend it up, and there you go. That's another recipe for you. So we have sauce, we have soup, we have chicken salad, we have tuna salad, all good. We spoke about chicken wings. And now I want to talk a little bit about the fact that Mother's Day is coming up and Easter just passed, but I've been craving lamb. Now, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say roast lamb. I'm going to say like a chunk of roast lamb. And that's how they sell it. They sell it on the bone. I do my shopping at Costco because I am the Costco hoe. And they sell the whole kind of leg of lamb, but it's boneless. And you know what? As a cook, I can tell you that cooks generally gravitate to the bone in, and I do as well. But I will make exceptions, and one of those is lamb, for a couple of reasons. Because lamb has a lot of taste, and we're going to give it a lot of taste with the recipe that I give you. And so the bone not only would make it take a lot longer to cook, but then you have to carve it, and it's whatever. You don't need to have the bone in this case. I'm totally fine with boneless leg of lamb. And I think 2 ingredients you could do, but I'm going to suggest 3 or 4. And I take that boneless leg of lamb and I stab it at first and insert some thinly sliced garlic into those stab wounds. You like garlic? It's going to add a nice flavor to it. You cut thin slices of garlic. You slice thin slices into the lamb all around, top, bottom, whatever. And you insert slices of garlic into that flavor. Beautiful. Now, I would say salt and pepper, and I am going to say salt and pepper, but don't use a lot of salt here because why? Because the way that I cook lamb involves 2 other ingredients, one of which is already salty, and it's soy sauce, and the other ingredient is Dijon mustard. And so I love when I have 1/2 of a jar in my refrigerator of French Dijon mustard, because I'm going to now fill that jar with soy sauce, and I'm going to shake it. And I'm going to take that combination of Dijon mustard and soy sauce, and I'm going to rub it on every visible inch of lamb that I see. And if you haven't black peppered the lamb before, go ahead and black pepper it now. And you've done everything really that you need to do to have extraordinary lamb in terms of flavoring it. Everything now is going to be about the oven and cooking it. If you had fresh rosemary or thyme, feel free to stick it in a couple of crevices. Find a place for it if you want. It certainly adds flavor. It's not crucial. It's nice. What's the best part of this thing, of course, is the combination of the Dijon mustard and the soy sauce, the garlic, and then that lamb, that leg of lamb, that beautiful thing, which has now been marinating for anywhere from 1 minute to, some hours, gets roast off in the oven. I would say 375, and depending on how big a piece of lamb it is, you can check it after an hour. The best way to handle lamb is to take a thermometer at some point and stick it in there and get it to the temperature that you want it to be. I think lamb generally, for me, if I recall, is going to be in that 135 range, 140. It could be less. It depends how you like your lamb cooked. Medium is fine for me. Medium rare is good. But the thing about lamb actually is that it's not terrible when it's cooked, even beyond that. So that's your thing. And while you're cooking that lamb, You're saying to yourself, I need some potatoes with this, don't I? And the answer is yes, you do. So if you're a person that likes a mashed potato, that certainly works. If you're a person that likes a baked potato, you can do that. I think the thing I like is, are there some potatoes that I can put directly into the roasting pan and let it all happen together? And the answer is sure. You can get those little Yukon Golds and you throw those right into the pan. And when I do that, I usually will give them a little hit of olive oil. If you happen to have some rosemary, that'll be good with it. And those are going to want some salt as well and some pepper. And you have yourself, ladies and gentlemen, a beautiful leg of lamb. That's good for you, the family. It's a nice way to say Happy Mother's Day to Mother if she's eating lamb. And, yeah, you know, I starting to get a little peckish, if you know what I'm saying. Because today we have discussed how to turn tomatoes into tomato sauce and use them either for pasta or to put them in your soups or your sauce bases, how to make shakshuka, how to make some roasted vegetable soup, what to do with chicken breast, which is to say chicken salad, how to make a tuna salad, that's good to me as well. I'm in the mood for lamb, so we talked about that. Throw in some potatoes. Chicken wings are good. And damn, I think that's going to cover us for now. That's episode 131 of All You Can Eat. And remember, next time you come back, I think we should talk a little bit more about the fabulousness that is Miami, because it's great down here. In the meantime, thank you to the gang over at Armed Radio Global, producing the show here, which is available to you if you want to hear any of the last 130 episodes on pretty much everywhere that you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all of the places, etc., etc. If you're interested in, 100 recipes and understanding how to cook with the most taste, fewest ingredients, and the least effort, you can certainly find a copy of my cookbook, Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. And if you need to find me, ask any questions, contact me, take a look at recipes, other product recommendations, you simply go to realrobrosenthal.com. A pleasure to be with you, my friends. Thank you for joining in. Back at you next time. And remember, life is short, so never waste a meal.
Okay, well, the cheering is dying down now, and I think we have a new candidate, and we have a new favorite vegetable, which is asparagus. Let's go back to the station.
You are listening to Armed Radio Global, home of Night Talk, with Joe Rocks. Thursdays, 10 p.m. Eastern, and you can find us in all the usual places. Armed Radio Global.